The most powerful move in any room is not what you say. It's what you refuse to say. Because the moment you stay silent, the power doesn't disappear. It shifts. And most people never realize when it happens. Every argument has a winner. Not the loudest, not the smartest, the one who controls emotional gravity. When you speak too quickly, you give information. When you explain, you give leverage. But when you say nothing, people project, people panic, people reveal themselves. Machiavelli understood this rule of power long before psychology gave it a name. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a weapon. Welcome to the Prince's Doctrine. From the moment you were young, you were trained to speak. Speak up for yourself. Explain your side. Defend your intentions. Clarify misunderstandings. Silence was framed as fear. Stillness as insecurity. Restraint as submission. But that lesson was never meant to empower you. It was meant to expose you. Because only those without power are required to explain themselves. The powerful are never rushed, never pressured, never emotionally reactive. They don't speak to be understood. They let others speak to be exposed. This is the first illusion you must destroy if you want control. The illusion that talking equals strength. In reality, talking is often a confession. Every word reveals intent. Every explanation leaks motivation. Every emotional reaction hands over leverage. And the people around you, whether they realize it or not, are always watching for those leaks. Silence shuts that door completely. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. Not because it's weak, but because it removes predictability. And the human brain hates unpredictability. Psychologically, silence creates what is called cognitive strain. When the mind can't read intentions, it begins to fill the gaps. And what does it fill them with? Fear, assumption, projection. People assume the worst. They imagine judgment. They invent meaning where none was given. And in that moment, the silent person becomes powerful. Not by doing anything, but by allowing others to collapse under their own imagination. This is why interrogators use silence. This is why master negotiators pause longer than necessary. This is why seasoned leaders say less as they rise higher. Not because they lack words, but because they understand weight. Consider the court of King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. He ruled not just through armies or law, but through presence. He often remained silent during disputes among nobles. No correction, no reassurance, no clarification. And that silence drove his court into paranoia. Every noble interpreted his silence as judgment. They competed for favor that was never promised. They revealed loyalty, desperation, and insecurity without being asked. Louis XIV didn't need to manipulate. He let silence do it for him. This is how power truly works. The less you reveal, the more others reveal themselves. Most people lose power the moment they feel misunderstood. They rush to correct perceptions. They explain intentions that were never questioned. They defend against accusations that were never spoken. And in doing so, they surrender their position. Because the one who is explaining is already beneath the one who is listening. Silence flips that hierarchy instantly. The moment you stop reacting, the emotional burden shifts. The other person begins to feel exposed. They wonder, did I say too much? Did I misjudge him? Why isn't he responding? And that discomfort forces action. More words. More justification, more emotional leakage. This is not accidental. This is biology. In primate psychology, dominant figures conserve energy. They move less. They react slower. They make fewer signals. Excessive movement and noise are traits of lower status animals. used to signal harmlessness or submission. Humans are no different. The one who stays still controls the frame. The one who speaks first loses it. Machiavelli warned rulers not to reveal their thoughts freely, not because secrecy is cruel, but because predictability is fatal. A predictable man can be controlled. An unreadable man cannot. History rewards the unreadable. Take Napoleon Bonaparte. In meetings, Napoleon often listened silently while generals argued strategy. He would let them exhaust themselves, contradict each other, expose weaknesses in their own logic. Only then, sometimes with a single sentence, he would decide. That sentence carried weight because it came after silence. Had he spoken early, he would have sounded like another opinion. By waiting, he became the verdict. This is the difference between noise and authority. Authority does not compete. It concludes. Silence also acts as armor. Insults lose power when unanswered. Provocations die without reaction. Manipulation fails when there is no emotional hook. Most people are controlled not by force, but by their reactions. If someone can make you angry, they can make you predictable. If they can make you explain, they can make you weak. Silence severs that control. It denies others access to your emotional state, and what cannot be accessed cannot be exploited. This is why silence feels rude in modern society. Because modern society rewards emotional transparency. It encourages oversharing. It praises vulnerability without teaching discernment. But vulnerability without control is not strength. It is exposure. The powerful choose when to be open. They are not pressured into it. Silence is not about hiding. It is about timing. There is a moment to speak, and there is a moment to let the room tilt. Most people talk themselves out of power before they ever feel it. They mistake presence for participation. They believe relevance comes from contribution, but relevance actually comes from restraint. The room listens harder when you don't fill it. Eyes follow the quiet one. Meaning gathers around silence like gravity. And once you understand this, something shifts inside you. You stop needing to win arguments. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself to people who never earned clarity. Because you realize something dangerous. You don't need to say anything to be felt. Silence is not empty. It is loaded. And once you learn to carry it, the balance of power will never be the same again. Once you understand that silence creates pressure, the next realization is unsettling. Silence doesn't just protect you. It forces others to act against their own interests. Because human beings cannot tolerate emotional uncertainty for long. When there is no response, no reaction, no feedback, the mind starts spiraling. And spiraling minds make mistakes. This is why silence is feared, not consciously, but instinctively. In conversations, the first person to speak after silence is almost always the weaker one. They feel the tension first. They feel exposed first. They feel the need to fix something that isn't broken. So they talk. They add context that wasn't requested. They soften statements that didn't need softening. They reveal insecurities they didn't intend to show. Silence turns patience into a weapon. This is how skilled interrogators extract confessions without threats. This is how elite negotiators secure better terms without demands. And this is how manipulators expose themselves when they believe they are in control. You see, manipulation requires feedback. A manipulator needs your reaction to adjust strategy. Anger tells them where to push. Defensiveness tells them where you feel weak. Explanations tell them what you fear being misunderstood about. Silence gives them nothing. And when a manipulator receives nothing, panic sets in. They begin overplaying their hand. They escalate emotionally. They contradict themselves. They reveal urgency. This is where power silently changes ownership. History is full of men who ruled not by intimidation, but by withholding reaction. Consider Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. In negotiations, Bismarck often remained silent after receiving proposals, even favorable ones, not to reject them, but to let the other side doubt themselves. Minutes would pass, sometimes longer. The opposing negotiators would start revising their offers against themselves. They interpreted silence as dissatisfaction. In reality, it was control. Silence makes people negotiate with their own fear. This principle applies far beyond politics. In arguments, silence reframes the entire interaction. The moment you stop responding emotionally, the conflict loses oxygen. The other person expects resistance. When they don't get it, their aggression turns inward. They begin justifying themselves. And justification is submission, disguised as confidence. People only justify themselves to someone whose judgment they respect or fear. When that's why silence often enrages weak people, not because it insults them, but because it denies them dominance. They want to provoke reaction. Reaction confirms relevance. Silence erases it. This is also why silence feels unnatural at first. Your ego wants to defend itself. Your emotions want validation. You want to be seen as right. But power doesn't come from being right. It comes from being untouchable. When you master silence, insults slide past you. Accusations die unfinished. Provocations fall flat. And something strange happens. People start respecting you without knowing why. They sense emotional self-sufficiency. And emotional self-sufficiency is rare. Most people are emotionally dependent on approval, reassurance, attention. When you remove that dependency, you disrupt the hierarchy. Silence signals, I don't need anything from you. And the human mind interprets that as high status. This is why leaders speak less as they rise. Why executives pause longer before answering. Why experienced figures rarely rush to respond. They don't need to prove presence. Their presence is assumed. Silence also allows you to observe patterns others miss. When you're not busy talking, you're watching. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, contradictions. You start seeing who is nervous, who is lying, who is seeking validation. And once you see these patterns, you realize something dangerous. Most people betray themselves constantly, if you give them space. Silence creates that space. This is where silence becomes ruthless, because now it's no longer passive, it's intentional. You choose when to withhold response. You choose when to let tension stretch. You choose when to end it. And when you finally speak, your words land heavier, not because they are louder, but because they are final. Silence trains others to listen when you do speak. It conditions the room. They learn that your words are not filler. They are outcomes. This is the moment where silence stops being a tactic and becomes an identity. You are no longer reactive. You are no longer predictable. You are no longer emotionally available on demand. And that terrifies people who rely on control, because control only works on those who respond. Silence breaks the loop. It ends the game without announcing it. And the most dangerous part? You don't look aggressive. You don't look dominant. You look calm, which makes your power invisible. And invisible power is the hardest to challenge. At some point, something irreversible happens. You stop feeling the urge to respond, not because you are calm, but because you no longer feel challenged. This is the stage most people never reach. They use silence occasionally, but inside, they are still reactive, still emotional, still craving resolution. True power begins when silence no longer feels like effort, when it feels natural. Because silence is not about holding back words, it's about having nothing to prove, and people can sense that instantly. The room changes when you enter and say less. Conversations slow down around you. People choose their words more carefully, not because you demanded respect, but because your restraint forces it. Humans mirror emotional states subconsciously. When you are calm, controlled, and unreadable, others become self-conscious. They begin monitoring themselves, and the one who monitors themselves is already beneath the one who does not. This is the final psychological inversion. You are no longer responding to the environment. The environment responds to you. Silence also reshapes how time works in your favor. Most people rush because urgency exposes them. They speak fast to avoid judgment. They explain quickly to avoid suspicion. But when you are silent, you move at your pace. And whoever controls the pace controls the interaction. This is why experienced power figures pause before answering even simple questions. That pause is not hesitation. It is ownership of time. And time dominance is status dominance. Historically, this trait separated rulers from servants. Consider Emperor Augustus, Rome's first true emperor. Unlike flashy conquerors before him, Augustus ruled through restraint. In public forums, he often listened more than he spoke. He allowed senators to argue, posture, and expose rivalries. Then, he would speak briefly, decisively, and nothing further needed to be said. His silence created inevitability. People didn't fear his words. They feared his judgment. Silence trains people to imagine consequences. Words limit imagination. Silence expands it. This is why silence is more intimidating than threats. A threat is specific. Silence is infinite. And the human mind always imagines something worse than reality. At this level, silence also becomes self-mastery. You are no longer hijacked by ego. Insults don't touch you. Provocation feels distant. You watch emotional chaos like weather, present, but not personal. And that emotional distance makes manipulation impossible, because manipulation feeds on reaction. Take away reaction, and manipulators starve. They will escalate at first. They may become louder, more dramatic, more aggressive. This is the extinction burst, the final attempt to regain control. And if you remain silent through it, they collapse. They either retreat, expose themselves, or self-destruct. This is why silence is dangerous, not to you, but to those who rely on control. At this stage, people stop trying to test you. They sense boundaries without seeing them. They feel resistance without confrontation. You don't need to assert dominance. You embody it. And when you do speak, rarely, selectively, your words cut through noise. They end discussions. They reset dynamics. They carry consequence. Because silence trained everyone to listen. This is the final law of power. Speak only when your words change reality. Everything else is noise. Most people talk to feel alive. You stay silent to remain untouchable. Most people argue to win. You stay silent to own the outcome. And once you cross this threshold, there is no going back. Because you realize something most never will. Power was never in your voice. It was in your restraint. And the moment you understood that, the shift already happened.